Artemis. Her cult drew worshippers from across the ancient world, and Ephesus had grown rich on the tourist trade. Paul's message that there was only one true God and it wasn't Artemis was bound to cause trouble. At the ancient entrance to the city, I met archaeologist Julian Bennett.
At the time St. Paul would have been here, this would have been full of ships, probably 100 or so ships.
Right up to here?
Right up to here. We're actually more or less on the harbour edge. We're standing at the harbour gateway here. When you look up into the distance, you can see the hills going round there. The river would have come right up to here, the sea would have come right up to here as well.
What would Paul have found when he first arrived here as far as religion was concerned? What would he have been faced with?
Artemis, the goddess.
The goddess?
The main goddess of the city. This is her birthplace. This is where she belongs. She has her wonderful temple just outside the city, one of the 7 wonders of the world. It would have been built beautiful white marble. I mean, Paul would have seen this when he sailed into the harbour. He would have known he was coming into a nest of paganism, if you like.
I've always read that Paul, first of all, went to synagogues to preach whenever he visited somewhere. Was there a Jewish population here?
Yes, there was a very large one, certainly from 300 years before the time of Paul. We don't know exactly how large, but possibly between 5,000 and 10,000, and the population stayed here even after Paul carried on being Jewish as well. And we can see that quite clearly from the menorah carved into the library here. And somebody's sitting down one day carving this away.
God. Carving on the steps of a library?
Yes.
Ephesus had no problem tolerating other gods. Even the Jewish god was being worshipped here. But Paul threatened the status quo. His new way was exclusive, and his message to Ephesus was blunt. The end of the world is coming. You waste your time with idols. Artemis is no god at all and cannot save you. You must follow Jesus. An obscure crucified carpenter from Galilee. One thing you have to say about Paul, he certainly wasn't bothered by conflict.
This is a 1st century statue of the goddess Artemis. I wonder if this could have been the very one that Paul might have looked at. And try to imagine what he would have felt when he saw this image for the very first time. He probably thought the very same things as actually came out of his mouth. You're just made of stone. Push you over and you'll break into hundreds of pieces. We know the cult of Artemis goes back 1,000 years before Paul even arrived. And what sort of man must he have been to come to a city like this that had been worshipping a goddess Artemis for 1,000 years and believed that he could change their system of belief?
But Paul was not only taking on a long-established religion, he was also threatening the very economy of Ephesus. His message put people's livelihoods at risk. Those who came to worship Artemis were unlikely to leave without first buying a small copy of the goddess as a souvenir.
I'm going to be taught how to make an icon here. I've never made an icon before. Oh, this is going to be fun. Oh, thank you. I'm glad I wore black.
For the city's idol makers, anyone converting pagans was bad for business.
I don't think St. Paul would be too happy with me doing this, considering I have now become an idol maker.
Ephesus Theatre.
Ephesus Theatre?
Yes.
And here?
Yes.
I think he's got me working on the whole thing here. I'm now building a theatre.
Okay.
Oh, here she is. There she is, just out of the oven. As I said, I'm glad I wore black. Oh my goodness me. I have never ever done this. This is the back of her dress coming through. And her head and her face. There she is. That's what all the fuss was about. And that's what he came to change.
Artemis was perhaps Paul's greatest challenge. He spent longer in Ephesus than anywhere on his travels. But opposition to Paul's preaching was growing. Eventually, we're told, craftsmen worried about both their religion and their trade led a riot against Paul.
They all gathered together here in this theatre. And Demetrius, who was a silversmith, who was making idols of Artemis, addressed the crowd. Men, you know we receive a good income from this business, and you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and in practically the whole province of Asia. He says that man-made gods are no gods at all. There is danger that not only our trade will lose its good name, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited, and the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty. And he really did. He whipped up the crowd to a frenzy, and they started shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians! Great is Artemis of the Ephesians! Great is Artemis of the Ephesians!" You can hear it ringing around the theatre. And it was very soon after this that Paul probably realized that his life was in danger, and after 2 years he decided it was time to leave.
Paul had been forced to leave the city, but it appears his work here was not in vain. Ephesus was one of the great hubs of the empire, and visitors to the city eventually went home. Some of them took Paul's message with them. His words were spreading across Asia Minor. Ephesus is still being excavated, but so far no churches dedicated to Paul or traces of his time here have been discovered inside the city. But high above Ephesus, in a mountainside cave, I was told there was a reminder of him.
I'm here on a hillside above Ephesus, and my guide Serkan is going to show me a cave that's associated with St. Paul. I'm looking forward to this very much indeed. This is quite a climb, but I think it's going to be worth it. Nearly there.
Discovered in 1906, the Grotto of St. Paul is thought to have been a sacred Christian site since the 1st or 2nd century.
Got my torch. Ha! Look there. But there he is, my goodness. I've been hearing about him and talking about him so much, and that's extraordinary to see. It's a bit scary, actually, isn't it? Because if I grew a beard, that wouldn't be too dissimilar to me. A little bit.
A little bit.
Wouldn't take too much, though, would it? Let's go down there. What's down here? Oh, there's some more. Some more frescoes. Oh, goodness. These look like saints. And there's a lot of them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
The grotto was decorated with frescoes and inscriptions over the course of many centuries. The portrait of Paul was added in the 6th century, along with that of St. Thecla, famous locally as a female follower of Paul.
Yeah, he does look like me, doesn't he? That's really weird. Anyway, bye-bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Seeing the image of Paul and Thecla in Paul's grotto really inspired me to find out more about their story, and I was reading a book called Acts of Paul and Thecla. And there was what I believe to be the only physical description of Paul ever written, and I put it down in my notebook. He was a man of middling size, and his hair was scanty, and his legs were a little crooked, and his knees were projecting, and he had large eyes. His eyebrows met, his nose was somewhat long, and he was full of grace and mercy. At one time he seemed like a man, and at another time he seemed like an angel. Now, apart from the physical description, I was
also very interested, because I think that also describes his personality. At one time, he could seem very direct, very human, very earthy. He certainly didn't suffer fools gladly. And at another time, he could be very fatherly and very gentle.
Paul's journeys through Asia Minor helped lay the foundations of the faith that would one day become Christianity. Even though Turkey is now a Muslim country, his influence lasts to this day. Something I've got no doubt about at all is that he was a man of total extremes. There was no grey area about Paul. It was either black or white. Whatever happened to him on the road to Damascus was extreme, and it changed his worldview forever.
But what's really interesting for me is that it didn't change his personality or character. He was a man of total conviction and extremes of behavior. He could be very angry, imperious, proud. He could be very boastful, my way, not yours. He had also a fanatical drive and energy because he genuinely believed that Jesus was going to come back soon, and for him the end of the world was really imminent. So I've learned a great deal about this man, and I'm not sure at the moment whether I like him very much. Would I have dinner with him? Well, I don't know, perhaps just one course. But I've only found out about him so far. There's so much more that I need to know to have a fully rounded character, so much more that I need to discover about this extraordinary man. After 10 years or so of travel through what is now modern-day Turkey, Paul managed to set up small Christian communities in the major cities of Rome's Eastern Empire. And these cities were always situated either on major roads or in major seaports. And it was from these cities that the message was able to spread out to the surrounding countryside. But in a letter to the Romans, Paul wrote, "There is no more place for me to work in these regions." And so in a sense, I suppose, Paul's work in Asia Minor was done. And so he set his sights firmly towards the West. He wrote again, "It's always been my ambition to preach the gospel where Christ was not known." And so his journey into Europe was about to begin. And this set him on a collision course with the power of Rome.